There's been some big time names that hit the trade market in the last few days. Guys of the likes of Jalen Ramsey, Kyle Pitts is in the news, of course, Trey Hendrickson, Jai Alexander, and even Terry McLaurin. So let's discuss whether or not they fit the Chargers mold and should the Chargers trade for them in 2025. Let's get into it. Oh, man, there's some hot and heavy news hitting the trade market. Monday morning, Jai Alexander is now a free agent. Some other guys have been seeking trades to stand away from the team, like Jalen Ramsey of sorts. Kyle Pitts is in trade talks. He on his last year of his deal. Trey Hendrickson says he doesn't want to play unless he get a new deal, which has put him in odds with the Cincinnati Bengals. And even Terry McLaurin's fighting for a new contract in Washington. He might be dealt. So, do any of these guys fit the Chargers' idea of doing things, and do they fit the Harbaugh and Mitchell way? And will they add value to the team is the question. So let's talk about these guys individually and what I feel like they can or cannot be an asset to the team, and whether or not they will add value to the team, and will they bolster the roster in 2025. So let's start off with Jalen Ramsey. The fandom has been buzzing about him and whether or not they should reunite him with his former FSU teammate, or I'm not even sure they were teammates, but I think they are friendly with each other, and him and Derwin James, and that's Jalen Ramsey. So they was buzzing on Twitter about the fact that they should reach out to the Dolphins and trade for Jalen Ramsey. Now, I hate to be bearer of bad news or rain on your parade, but I have my reservations about Jalen Ramsey. I'm not going to lie to you. There are certain things that bother me about him and what they're trying to build in LA. He is a talented, highly talented, former Pro Bowl corner. But he is 31 years old. He's a divisive personality. He's also expensive to be divisive. And I think he's past his prime, in my honest opinion. And I'm not sure he knows it. I'm not sure he's still, aware that he's on the downturn of his career. He's still playing at a high level. I'm not going to take that away from him. He's still playing at a high level. He was the best corner on Miami's team last year. But I'm not sure he's a lockdown corner anymore at this point. And I'm not sure he knows it. And that's problematic when you are the last person to know what your skill set and your talent is. I would argue that he's more Charles Woodson at this point in his career, and his best position will be safety rather than corner. But again, he has to be able to accept that as well. You couple that with the fact that you have two young corners that you're developing. And Jalen's going to demand himself, and his price tag is going to demand the fact that he be on the field a lot, whether it be corner or it's safety. He's pushing somebody out of the room or off the field. At that stage of developing their career, I don't think that's a good idea. I think you should continue to develop Cam Hart and Sarheeb Steele and keep them on that path. And even if you're doing it from a safety perspective, you just drafted R.J. Mickens and you just paid Elijah Molden. So what does that do to them if he's going to play safety? Or slot corner, that former Derwin James role, and certain things they might want to do with him instead of what they do with Derwin. I'm not sure. But overall, as much as the fan base wants to see the star power on the roster, again, he's clearly an expensive trade piece. And I don't think he fits the culture in the locker room. And I think that if you remember who the coach is and who the head coach is for sure, he's not into diva or personality management. He's down for a person that's willing to be a part of what he wants to do and willing to sacrifice for the greater good of his program. So I think that Jalen's going to be a person that's going to honestly and truly speak his mind and be one of those guys that will definitely tell you he's unhappy the minute he is, and that's going to cause a problem in the locker room for my money. So I'm not a big on the idea of adding Jalen Ramsey for the price and the divisiveness that he may or may not cause. Now, I get you might say he can manage it with being with Derwin and all of the jazz, but again, the moment things don't go his way, he's going to have a problem. He gives me a lot of wide receiver diva vibes, although he's a corner. It's weird. But so I'm not really high on Jalen Ramsey, although I did like his skill set 3 or 4 years ago. to this team. Maybe that time before he actually reached Miami, he'd have been good for this organization. But I would have traded him for J.C. Jackson, that's for sure. But again, at this point, 31 years old, I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze for my money. So that's my piece on Jalen Ramsey. But more power to wherever he does do and land. But I don't think he's right for the Chargers. So moving on to Kyle Pitts. Now, I know we've been screaming for a tight end. We were saying that absolutely positive we could use a really good receiving athletic tight end. Now, Kyle Pitts is a great athlete. He has great potential. There's only one problem for him in this organization. He's a glorified wide receiver. He's slight of frame for a tight end. He's not much of a blocker. So that right there is a red flag for Harbaugh and Greg Roman. They want tight ends to be good at receiving, fine, but you got to be able to do both, which is why, although I think, I wouldn't mind it personally as him being a really dominant receiving option, him getting a second chance in LA, I don't think the Chargers pull a trigger on it just for the simple fact that he's not a traditional inline tight end. And by inline, I mean he's on the line of scrimmage and he's blocking in the run game. I don't think that's his bag, and I think that's not something he would do and do well. So, honestly and truly, I don't think they pull a trigger on him either. Just for his skill set. Again, I think he's a great athlete. I think he'll be a great asset. But again, with them drafting Oronde Gaskin, I think that they kind of got a poor man's version of that. So I don't think they pull a trigger on getting Kyle Pitts either. I think they want to see what they got with him because he's the same mold. Oronde is pretty much a glorified receiver as well. He's not much of a blocker. So why would you double down and trade for the two guys in the same breath? And you got to pay Kyle Pitts after this year. So why would you do that and give up draft capital in that space? So that make a whole lot of sense, although it's a pipe dream for some Chargers fans out there. I know. I'm raining on a parade, but I'm going to promise you it gets better towards the end. So moving on from Kyle Pitts, I think the next guy on my list is Trey Henderson. Now, Trey Henderson is at deep odds with the organization. He wants a new deal. He will not play without it. He might even sit out games depending on what the Bengals do with him in this conversation. But it could be, one of those things where you could steal him away for pretty cheap money. You don't have to pay his last year of his deal and then work out a new deal. But there's a caveat to this. The simple fact that he will honestly and truly not play until he has a new deal. So the thing about how things will go and get sticky with trade negotiations is that you got to compensate the Bengals to get them agree to it. And you got to get him a new deal before the trade goes through, because there's no point in signing him or trading for him and you don't have a new deal in place, because he's going to do the same thing he's doing with the Bengals now he will with the new team. He will just sit out till he gets a new deal. So I would honestly truly come to the table with the new deal, work that out with him on the side while you're working the trade with the Bengals, then get it done. But that's sticky in its own right. But there also is a caveat to his skill set and his stylistic way of doing things, and how he operates on the field. He's a 4-3 DN. He's a hand in the dirt 4-3 DN. The Chargers run a 34 style scheme, so they have their edge rusher standing up. He's more of a hand in the dirt kind of guy. So he doesn't directly fit the scheme. Now, I'm not saying that won't work. It'll just can't make that work. I mean, hell, he's the leading sack leader in the last 2 years, I want to say. So if you had him in the house, you would make it work, right? I get that. But the only problem is, again, is the issue with the scheme fit, on top of the fact that you have two young guys that you're trying to develop. You have Kyle Kennard, who you just drafted, and you have Tuli Tuipulotu, who is a budding superstar. So with Khalil Mack in the house as being the lead dog and veteran, you just re-signed Bud Dupree. I think they're pretty comfortable with the idea of what their rushing room looks like in this point. So I'm not sure they will pull a trigger on on Trey Henderson either. But stranger things happen. I mean, hell, like I said, his production is bar none the best. It's been the last 2 years. He's been defensive player of the year, candidate in the last couple of years, leading sack leader. What can you say? He's gonna up the sack total in the room just by walking in. So I mean, stranger things have happened, but I can see from a development standpoint, they might want to stab pat and not want to spend big money on Trey Henderson. But it depends on how ball and them guys feel about him. But and what the asking price will be and what the compensation will be going forward, because we do have money in cap. But you still got to pay Rashawn Slater and a few other guys. So do you pull the trigger? Is the question. But honestly and truly, it's a 75-25 chance that they do it, in my opinion. So we'll see how things go. But moving on to another guy that's interesting me is Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin here really intrigues me. I understand that his age is getting up there. He's about to be 30. Actually, I think he is 30 at this point. But I will say this. I think this move makes a lot of sense for the Chargers. The Chargers still don't have a true number one receiver on the outside. I get Trey and Mike Williams are vying for the outside X position. But to me, they're almost the same guy. I think Trey's a little bit faster in a sense. I think Johnson is unknown. We don't know what he is. And Ladd is a slot receiver. So adding Scary Terry to the wide receiver room would do nothing but bolster this offense, in my opinion. You see what he can do with a good quarterback last year with Jane Daniels, right? So imagine, even though he's getting up there and about to be 30 and seeking a new deal with 1 year left, I think if you sign him to a 2-year extension and you would truly have a number one receiver for the next 2 to 3 years, actually if you give him 1 year left and then 2 more years after that, you give yourself 3 years to find yourself a new number one receiver, which is way enough time. The guys you have on the roster now could develop into that, or you finally draft or pick up another guy, but it will allow you to have a true number one receiver and not have any drop off in offense until you find the next guy. So I think Terry McLaurin makes a lot of sense. This one I would do. I would definitely pull a trigger on Terry McLaurin if I can. Again, he's seeking a new deal. The trade conversation shouldn't be that ridiculous. Some mid-round pick maybe, because you do have to pay him, so you can kind of bleed that out of the Commanders' trade negotiations and say, hey, I'm going to give you the draft pick. I still got to pay him. So, meet me in the middle here somewhere. So maybe a 4th or 5th round pick. I would do it. And I would definitely bring him in. And truly, honestly, would love what this offense would look like from a pass perspective if Terry was added to this room with the receivers you already have. Because I would argue that once he's in-house, you almost would be mirroring the Eagles offense for 2024. Having the 2 to 3 good wide receivers on the outside, a dominant run game with Amarion and Najee. You put the Chargers in the driver's seat to compete at a high level in the AFC. I think they can take a step further and compete at a high level and really threaten the top teams in this conference if you do that. I think Terry makes a lot of sense. I think he'd be the money person I would spend the money on. You got $100 million in caps in 2026. I would extend Slater, pay McLaurin, and I feel like you're in good space for the next 3 years to compete at a high level and maybe even compete for a title. So I love the move for getting Terry McLaurin in-house, and they should do that if they can, if he's really available on the trade block. So I would definitely call the Commanders and say, hey, what's going on? I want to monitor the situation. If you're really trying to trade him, holler at me first. That's what I would do personally. So we'll see how things go, but I definitely like Terry McLaurin adding to this offense. I think he could be the number one receiver and be dominant target for Justin Herbert. And lastly, there's Jair Alexander. Now, he's newly on the trade list. He barely made the list because of this video coming out today. But yet again, he was just released on Monday morning for the Packers. I guess you can say they cited irreconcilable differences between the two. Jair wanted out of Green Bay. He's 28 years old, and outside of his recent injury history, I still see Pro Bowl level talent for the next 3 to 4 years. At a good cornerback clip. I think he has a good cornerback skill set and Pro Bowl level caliber cornerback left in him. I really do believe that. I have a feeling that he wanted out of the cold weather in Green Bay and maybe seeking a team that he could play with and possibly contend for a title. So that being said, his injury history is a slight concern for me, but I do think that that will not deter teams. He will be highly sought after. I was high on trading for him at around the draft time, maybe on draft day, one of those days, until I saw his cap number. He was really expensive in the last 2 years of his deal. He had $24 million cap hit and a $27 million cap hit, respectively. So I think that's why he's a free agent at this point instead of them being able to trade him. I think people didn't want to take on that amount of money in the contract, and reason why he is a free agent at this point. But he's still going to get paid from the Packers for the next 2 years. I think he has about $13 million for the next 2 years owed to him in his guaranteed money. So he's still going to make decent money from them. So you could get him on the cheap for the next 2 to 3 years, depending on what he wants in conversation. But the fact that he's a flat out free agent, I would entertain him, bring him in for a visit and talk to him, because I really wouldn't mind this one either. I think that bringing him in and helping him compete and push the young guys will be a good problem to have. I really wouldn't mind it. I know it's the same thing in a different wrapper, but having him and Cam Hart will almost assure me that you have at least one good guy that's going to play at any given time if one goes down. I mean, you don't want to, knock on wood, you don't want to say that both of them will go down through injury, but I think if you have him, Terry Steele, Cam Hart, Dante Jackson, I think those four would definitely, make your cornerback room look, real top tier level at this point. In all honesty, truly, and for my money, and this may sound like hate, but he can have Benjamin St. Juice roster spot right now. I would definitely take Jair Alexander over Benjamin St. Cooked. I would. I didn't like that move. I understood the stature of who he is, but I don't like his cover skills. I watched him for 4 years in Washington, and I didn't like what I saw in a lot of respects. So if you had to choose between having Jair Alexander as a free agent, having Benjamin St. Juice, give me Jair Alexander all day. Having them two line up with the two young boys, Dante Jackson, Jair, Tahib, and Cam, I'm in good company. We can do away with Dean Leonard and Ja'Seer Taylor as well, and just roll with that 4, and maybe bring up the young boy that you drafted in this 7th round, Traquez Bridges, and just roll with that group. And hey, let's make some money in the secondary. So with that being said, man, I'm hoping that they do make one of these 2 of these moves. I mean, again, the Chargers can be frugal in a sense, and the Harbaugh regime seems to be wanting to build through the draft. But we never really know exactly what they're going to do. But honestly, I think they should at least make one of those moves. It would add to the room, and I think it will help the Chargers compete in the long run. It won't be long-term deals. I mean, 2 to 3 years for Terry or Jair or both. I think you can afford it to do that with the rosters you have, adding Pro Bowl caliber players to your room, and it will push the young guys to make the team better overall. So we'll see what the Chargers do, man. But let me know in the comments how you feel about these guys and what my breakdowns were for each individual player. Always hit that subscribe button to never miss any Chargers content, any uploads, and you always got to remember to vote up.